Okay, for this video, we're talking about understanding matter. There are several questions that are asked during the course of the video. You're to number those, write out the question, fill in all the pertinent information that answers it on a sheet of notebook paper. You're going to do this for the entire video, and when you're done with this, you'll scan it and submit it to Blackboard for your homework assignment. Okay, for number one, what is an atom? An atom is a basic unit of matter. It's the smallest unit of matter, and it's the defining structure or the elementary structure for all of the elements that would be on the periodic table. Okay, what are the three parts of an atom? And this includes the charge and locations. So first of all, in the nucleus or the center of the atom, right here, there are two different particles that are found there, protons and neutrons. Okay, protons are positively charged. A lot of times you'll see them in the nucleus labeled as this or like this. Again, they're in the nucleus. The other particle are neutrons, which are neutral. They have no charge, so they'll be either listed as just a zero or neutron with a zero charge. And the third particle that makes up an atom are electrons. And electrons are orbiting around the nucleus. They go all around the nucleus, constantly moving. They are negatively charged, and they stay on the outside of the nucleus, meaning they orbit around the nucleus in these electron shells, or orbitals, or energy levels. All of it means the same thing. Why are atoms electrically neutral? Atoms are electrically neutral because the number of protons is equal to the number of electrons, meaning the number of positive charges will be equal to the number of negative charges, effectively canceling the charge out, giving the atom an overall charge of zero or no charge. What is an element and how do elements differ? Well, as you can see over here, this table is called the periodic table of the elements, or periodic chart of the elements, and it shows all the different elements that are on Earth. When atoms of the same type are assembled together or combined, it creates a pure substance, meaning it can't be broken down without altering the atoms that compose that. And this is called an element, when all the atoms are the same. Atoms differ by their number of protons, which is also called the atomic number. The atomic number is a number of protons in an atom. These over here, this is the atomic number of chlorine. The symbol Cl is chlorine. It has 17 protons and also 17 electrons, because those would balance out. A different element is nitrogen, given by this uppercase N, which has an atomic number of 7, meaning it has 7 protons and 7 electrons. So the atomic number gives you the number of protons and electrons. The symbol gives you the name, and this down here is giving you what's called the atomic mass, which is the number of protons plus the neutrons. Neutrons have no charge, but they do contribute atomic mass to the atom. Question 5. What 4 elements make up 96% of human body mass? Well, these 4 elements, carbon, oxygen, nitrogen, and hydrogen, compose most of the large biological molecules that would make up a human's body. Okay, we'll get more into that in a later section, but the big 4 are carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, and nucleic acids. And they have a large amount of carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen in them. These 4 atoms have unique atomic numbers. Hydrogen has an atomic number of 1, meaning it has 1 proton, 1 electron. Oxygen has 8 protons, 8 electrons. Okay, carbon has 6. Okay, 6 protons, 6 electrons, and nitrogen has 7. So 7 protons and 7 electrons, and then assorted neutrons in all of these. Number 6, what is a compound? And give 2 examples. Well, a compound is formed when 2 different types of atoms combine chemically. Okay, they're going to bond. Atoms bond. That's what they want to do. Okay, so when there are 2 different types of atoms, it's considered a compound. So we have a couple here, water, and this is shown water. This is 2 hydrogens and 1 oxygen. So here would be the oxygen with the 2 hydrogens. Okay, another one was ammonia, which is 1 nitrogen and 3 hydrogens kind of bonded to it. Carbon dioxide, which is 1 carbon atom and 2 oxygens. And hydrogen peroxide, which is oxygen and an oxygen and a hydrogen and a hydrogen. So the chemical formula down here is telling you the numbers of atoms in the molecule, and this is just showing you kind of an idea of how they bond in terms of where the atoms are going to bond to each other. Okay, number 7, how are compounds and elements different? So an element, remember, is a pure substance, So an element is going to be made up of only 1 type of atom. Now certain atoms will bond to each other. Like down here it shows oxygen gas is oxygen bonded to an oxygen. So pure substance, only 1 type of atom, it's an element. A compound is when there are 2 or more types of atoms. So this would be a compound because we have oxygen and 2 hydrogens, 2 different types of atoms, therefore forming a compound. Okay, this is an element, oxygen bonded to oxygen, and this is a pure substance called helium. Number 8, what is an ion and what makes an ion positively or negatively charged? When an atom gains or loses 1 or more electrons, its charge is no longer going to be neutral, because remember, in an element, in an atom of an element, the number of positive charges on the protons will be equal to the number of negative charges on the electrons. It will cancel out, and this will be a neutral atom. Okay? To give an atom an electrical charge, it would happen because there's a different number of protons and electrons. Now, the way that happens is atoms are either going to give up or take on electrons. Okay, all the bonding, all the transferring of energy in atoms comes from the electrons being transferred or from one atom to the other or taken on from one atom to the other. Okay, in order to make a positive ion, an atom would lose 1 or more electrons. Lose in that it would give it up to a different atom to make itself more stable. It's going to make the outer electron shell full, and it makes it more stable. To create a negative ion, it's going to gain 1 or more electrons. So it's taking on negative charge, and that would become a negative ion. Positive ions are called cations. Negative ions are called anions. What ions are found in living things? Well, there are several. We'll just mention a few here. Hydrogen ions. Okay, this would be a hydrogen ion, which is, in essence, is just a proton, because hydrogen only has 1 proton and 1 electron. These are used a lot to make chemical energy, specifically the production of ATP, which is the energy carrying molecule that living things use for chemical processes. Calcium ions, Ca2+, this has a 2+ charge, so it gave up 2 electrons, and these help with muscle movement. Chloride ions, Cl-, these are taking on 1 electron, so they allow for chemical signals in the brain to happen. So, and there are several more: potassium, magnesium. There's a bunch more different ions that are used, but these are the ones that are most often used. This is a +1 ion because it gave away its electron, so it's at a positive charge. This is a +2 ion because it gave up 2 electrons, and this is a -1 ion because it took on 1 electron. Okay, so why do atoms bond? Well, they bond to become stable. They become stable by filling up their outermost shell. Okay, number 11, what are valence electrons? Valence electrons are electrons in the outer shell, and this is where the chemical bonds happen. So in this atom, which is aluminum, this is the valence shell, or the outermost shell, and there are 3 atoms in it. Like in the third energy level or third electron shell, I can hold a maximum of 8. So from an energy standpoint, aluminum would be more likely to give up 3 electrons than take on 5. It just would make more sense to it from an energy standpoint. So when it gives up its 3, it would form aluminum with a 3+ charge. Okay, atoms bond to make stable. That's why they form compounds, is to be stable and make things where they're less reactive. And valence electrons are the electrons that are being transferred or shared during chemical bonds. Okay, so there are 2 types of bonds that we're going to talk about on this slide. First is an ionic bond. So what is an ionic bond? Ionic bond is formed when one atom gives electrons, 1 or more electrons, and another atom takes on 1 or more electrons. This is done to fill the outer orbital of each atom, and the atoms are bonded together by their opposite charges. For example, this is sodium, which has 1 electron in its outermost shell, and this is chlorine, which has 7 in its outermost shell. And the sodium will transfer this electron here to fill the outer shell on the chlorine, creating a sodium ion, Na+1, and forming a chloride ion, Cl-1. The positive and negative are going to attract, and it'll form this ionic compound formed by this ionic bond between the sodium ion and the chloride ion. A covalent bond is slightly different. So rather than giving up electrons, what they do is the electrons are shared. So when they share, like this is hydrogen gas on this guy, this covalent bond, hydrogen has 1 electron in its outer shell, 1 for the first electron, or the one closest, the first electron orbital, the one closest to the nucleus. Only 2 electrons are going to fit max. So if these guys share these 2 electrons, meaning they're going to spend time going around both nuclei, this is forming a covalent bond, and they are bonded by this shared attraction. So the atoms are literally stuck together because of these atoms being shared. So how are ionic bonds and covalent bonds similar, and how are they different? They're similar, and they chemically bond to stabilize the outermost shell of each atom. The differences come in that covalent bonds are going to share the electrons, and they will form something called molecules, because you can share electrons. Atoms of the same type can share electrons and form covalently, so they'll make molecules. Ionic are going to form by giving on or giving away or taking on electrons, and these are going to make compounds because they are always going to be 2 different types of atoms that are ionically bonding. And lastly, what is a molecule? A molecule is formed when 2 or more atoms are held together by a covalent bond. If the atoms are different, it will be a compound. If the atoms are the same, it would be a molecule. So a water molecule is held together by covalent bonds, and it's a compound. Oxygen gas is held together by covalent bonds, and it's a molecule because the atoms are of the same type.